Hey, greetings friends and family. This is Kasabez Maakmaah.
And Nehez Meniooh.
We're here with another episode of the Chicago Sunnyside Podcast. Today we'll be talking about the Kemetic New Year, otherwise known as the actual New Year.
I know it's been a while, but if you thought we were leaving you, we're not.
Chicago, Chicago, that toddling town, Chicago, Chicago, I'll show you around.
The corner was our magic, our music, our politics. Fires raised as tribal dances and war cries broke out on different corners. Power to the people.
And just say Shot City. If you don't know by now, I'm talking about Shot Town. And just say Shot City, Shot City.
Happy New Year, everybody. It's been a few weeks since you saw us last, and that's because with the new year, we were very busy in the Kebtah organization, traveling. We had some graduations. So
a lot of big things happening with Kebtah and more big things happening with Sunnyside Podcast. As you see, we don't have an interviewee this time because we're going to be changing our format, so look forward to more changes to come. We don't want to say too much about it now, but today we just wanted to bring you a special episode of the Sunnyside Podcast for the new year.
Well, plus, on this podcast, we interview activists. And, activists stay busy acting. So it's hard to catch up with some folks. It's hard to get interview appointments scheduled, and that schedule sticks. But regardless, if we have interviewees to bring on the show, we'll be sure to continue bringing you content, things to think about, things to look into in the city, things that could benefit you.
Anyway, if we don't get anyone on to interview, from now on you can expect us on the 1st and the 15th at least every month, and we will keep things consistent, and even if you just have to get used to seeing our faces every time, we'll live with that too.
So for those of you who are familiar with the Earth Center and some of the things that we have been doing for the last 25 years in Chicago, maybe you knew what we meant when we said Happy New Year. So for those of you who don't, and you are new to the Sunnyside Podcast or the Earth Center, I'm sure me saying Happy New Year in September throws some people off a little bit.
You might be thinking this was recorded 9-10 months ago.
You might think you have an old episode. You're not listening to the most current one. But the original New Year does start in September.
Yeah, September, usually the 10th or 11th, and this year it was the 10th, which corresponds with the Sirius star cycle.
But let's be clear on that, because it's not like the new year originally started in September. September wasn't around when the original calendar, started.
Yes, there was no month called September when this calendar came out. It's just that when the calendar most of us are familiar with came out, then what they call September 10th or 11th is what's on our new year, the original one.
So this year, the new year fell on the Gregorian date of September 10th, but on that day is, in the original Kemetic calendar, Tahuti the first, and the first month of the year is called Tahuti, and it starts a year of 13 months. That 13-month tradition has been kept by some calendars, like the Ethiopian calendar, I think, has 13 months. And if you go looking, the thing is, most of us today, especially in the big city, most of us who go to public schools, we don't really go looking to find out what other calendars exist around the world that are being used and what other calendars existed that have kind of fallen out of use. But when you go looking, you have things like, there's a Jewish holiday coming up, Rosh Hashanah.
I don't know.
I think that's what it's called. Jewish people don't get upset with me for mispronouncing it. Ask anybody in Bobo where I live. My French pronunciation is terrible, and I've been trying at that for 15 years. So don't get upset.
I wouldn't call it trying. Don't
But
mark yourself down.
unnecessary. We're not talking about that. We're getting off subject. But when you look into Rosh Hashanah, the actual meaning of the word in Hebrew means the start of the year, or it means the first of the year, something like that, and it happens in September. I think it's this week, if I'm not mistaken. And then also the Babylonian calendar started in September, and you'll see a few of, especially the ancient calendars, all start in what we in the West call autumn or fall.
Mm-hmm.
But they also coincide with harvest festivals around the planet. A lot of people don't realize, you know how people say New Yorkers see New York as a country in its own. A lot of people in the U.S., we don't really understand much about how other people live outside of U.S. U.S. has, different states, and we kind of know that there's different subtle differences in the ways of life and the accents from state to state.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't realize that even the season is not a phenomenon that covers the whole globe. When our season is fall over here, on the other side of the planet, in the other hemisphere, it's completely different.
Right.
So what you do find, though, is around the equatorial regions, this time of year brings harvest. And harvest is important because you're not only harvesting the food that you've grown, but you're also now getting the seeds that you will now be trying to preserve to the next season.
Well, it's harvest time in the Midwest and the northern regions here in the United States too.
Yes. And actually, in the place where the calendar comes from, this is actually the rainy season when you start to put those seeds down, prepare the earth to receive those seeds. So
yeah, so when around this time of year is when you'll see the rains. I mean, if you're talking about the north, like here in the Midwest, here in Illinois, Chicago, land, Wisconsin, Indiana, these areas, northern United States, to grow food, you need the warmth. But in other places, like in Africa, where you have regions close to the Sahara Desert, you don't lack warmth, but what you do lack is water. So you have to wait for it to be raining. So whether it's the warmth or the rain, either way brings a favorable time for us to have a harvest in this part of the world or that part of the world around this time of year.
Well, yeah, and you're right. The harvest is a lot in the northern hemisphere and around the equatorial regions, and the Nile is the rainy season. But I only start like that just to really connect it to what's going on in nature, because really that's what a calendar is supposed to be for us, a way to track what's going on in nature, and now we can schedule what we're doing, our activities, our work, with what's going on in nature. And a lot of people, that awaken, that become woke, they start questioning why a new year would start in winter,
A new year that starts in winter and has no connection to any astronomical or terrestrial phenomenon whatsoever. January 1st has no significance, whether you're talking about energetically, whether you're talking about spiritually, whether you're talking about astronomically, scientifically, religiously. It has no connection to anything. So it's interesting that they'll decide to just start their year at that time. Why? Probably because they've just been making things up as they go. I think before they added the first 2 months, the January and February that we have now, the year used to start in spring because they were too busy just trying to survive the winter, to be trying to count time in the winter time.
Well, what's really kind of pitiful, kind of embarrassing, when you learn about the calendar is that the why is just because they wanted to do it their way.
Mm-hmm.
And now all of us live according to how they wanted to do it because they wanted to wrestle away authority from people that had studied long and hard on how to get us in alignment with nature, how to understand what's going on in the world around us, and then track what's going on in the world so that we could look ahead or see what's to come. And all of that study, all of that discipline, all of that hard work and that research was thrown away because I want to be the one.
Right.
So that's kind of, what's even more oppressive, because now everybody is running on time where we don't question where that time came from. And when we look at where that time came from, even when we just think about it, it just came from Gregory. It just came from some man's mind. It just came from some system's method of controlling other people.
Well, before it was Gregory, it was Julius, and before it was Julius, it was somebody else who's been forgotten in history.
Mm-hmm.
But the mark that they've left is still here. Even to say they want to do it their way is kind of like giving them too much credit, because they didn't even have a way to do it. Mm-hmm. They just said, "Oh, these people over here have calendars. We want to have a calendar. We want our calendar to be the one that everyone has to follow." Okay, this is what our calendar is. They just came up with something just to say we're the ones in control. But the calendar wasn't even their idea. They just saw other people doing it. They said, "No, we want to be the one, and you follow ours." And then theirs is just totally based on conjecture and speculation and appropriation, and eventually totally plagiarizing the original model, because at first they thought they didn't have to use the Kemetic model for accuracy, and then they realized, our time is inaccurate and it's actually becoming embarrassing. So then they had to adopt the original model of a 4-year cycle, 365 days for 3 years, and 366 days for a 4th year.
So all of that, we don't want to get into too much mathematics. We know you have a lot of podcasts to listen to, and if we start going into equations and numbers, you're probably going to turn away. But all of that just to give an intro and explain, this is really what we are in, the time right now. We are actually in the 21st day of the year, 21st of the month. Mm-hmm. So we just came through the new year, and that brought a lot of celebrations. That brought some of the different original holidays that happened at the beginning of the year, which is also a very old concept. Mm-hmm. Holiday coming more from the concept of holy days, mm-hmm. days that are sacred because of what's happening in nature, because of what's happening in the world of the gods and what's going on in the invisible and all of that. So that's really why you were maybe missing us. We were busy with that.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say one more thing on that, because you were talking about a calendar is to get us in contact with nature. And as we say, as we just said, the Gregorian calendar that most of us use, whether even we know it by the name Gregorian calendar or we just call it the calendar because we don't know any other calendar. In any case, that calendar that we're using that starts on January 1st and ends on December 31st, has no astronomical foundation for why the new year starts, what the length of the months are, what the names of the months are, the length of the week, anything like that. But maybe for us in the modern world, we don't really seem to be bothered by that because our whole lives have been disconnected from nature. So to have a calendar that connects us with nature, we think that that's not really something that we need, because we feel like we're above that now. Like we've gotten to a point where we can control things enough that we don't need to be basing our lives on natural cycles and natural phenomena.
Well, that's the thing. When you don't have something, you've been disconnected from something, you don't really know what you're missing.
Exactly.
And then you talk about getting close to nature and you just want to hug a tree or kiss a flower or go run naked in the field, but none of that has anything to do
skinny dip in the ocean
with aligning yourself with nature. That's just kind of entertaining yourself with nature. But there were these technologies that indigenous life had that kept you connected with the rhythms that nature goes through, with the rhythms that nature gives us. And that's really what the new year is supposed to be about. You know, even the idea that the new year brings fresh energies, and so let's have a time where we make New Year's resolutions and we try to we try to accomplish things with that new energy that's coming to us. All of that comes from a real calendar. But now when that first day of the year is not based on any astronomical timing or anything happening with the energy shifts in the world, you're just kind of entertaining yourself.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting how much we just don't know that time is significant in nature. Like, we think of plants. When we think of nature, let's say we think of plants, we think of animals. But we don't think about time, we don't think about rhythms, we don't think about timing, like things that happen at a particular time, things that happen at a particular frequency. You know, for example, this time of the year is usually the time, as we said, rainy seasons in tropical areas, but also in this part of the world we have hurricanes. Recently we just had a hurricane that hit the East Coast and really tore it up, and our prayers go up to those people whose lives have been upended by that. I know a lot of people have died. These are the type of things you tend to see, and if you don't know the timing, that you don't know the time period for particular energies, then you won't know how to protect yourself and prepare and make sure that you are protected. You know, not only just making sure you build a house strong enough to withstand the winds, but you also have the protection that comes on the energetic, spiritual level, even the level of how we project ourselves to nature itself, to the existence itself. You know, how we're fitting in ourselves, like with the rhythm of what the time is calling for.
Yeah, but before we kind of get to those deeper insights, those higher dimensions, it's important to point out that those rhythms happen and we see them, because there are those that we can't not see, right? Mm-hmm. Like the rise of the sun, we see that. So we have the day, the change of the seasons, and then those 4 seasons or 3 seasons or 2 seasons, depending where you are in the world, we see when it comes back around to the beginning. We see that. Mm-hmm. And so in the original Indigenous or Kemetic calendar, you have that notion of the cycle, the year cycle, that's really for the human consciousness. Mm-hmm. Because we can see the seasons and we need to know when the seasons are coming, even to sustain ourselves with growing food. We have to know.
Yes.
But then you also have other types of years. And in the Gregorian calendar, we don't even really no. Maybe, we have leap year, but we don't really know what that's about. So you don't really get a good understanding of why you need more years,
Yeah. Well, sorry to
No, go ahead.
Because I see where you're going with that, but you just said something that made me think, like, okay, we see observable phenomena, and what I'm talking about is, like, you see the sunrise, you see the seasons change, you see certain things happen in nature, but we don't know that there's favorable times for us to do certain type of activities. Mm-hmm. There's certain times of the day that are favorable for certain activities versus others. That's why you see people tend to sleep during the nighttime. You have animals that are nocturnal. Mm-hmm. They're awake when it's dark. Mm-hmm. We're not those type of creatures. Mm-hmm. So when you get to start your day early with the sun, then your day will go different than if you wake up at noon. You know, your energies the way your day progresses will go different. If you want to wake up in the middle of the night, there's certain activities that are like favorable for those type of energies that are happening. So you know, that the traditional knowledge is not just about keeping time, but then having the wisdom of how to fit in with the time. And then there's certain things that you'll do during the week, certain things that you'll do during the year, and so on based on the time.
And many of us know that. Many of us see that just because again, it can't be hidden. I know I shouldn't drink coffee at night, right? I know I shouldn't go to sleep too late. I know if I go to sleep too early, I'm gonna be up in the middle of the night. So there are those things that we can't deny, we can't get away from. But just that's really what wisdom is about. That's what the wisdom of the people that went before you that have more experience is about, because then they've saw all of those things, and then they've put all of those things down into a system, into a science, and even preserved it in a tool that they pass down to their children, so that their children don't have to learn each time. What shouldn't I do at this time? What should I do at this time? But so we have that first year that's really about observable stuff for a person. And even in the traditions, or in Kemetic traditions in the calendar, we call that the farmer's year. But then there's 4 farmer's year in a real year, because a year is really talking about astronomical phenomena. But the 365 days is not really something that's tracking an astronomical phenomena. It's just a set component within an astronomical phenomena that is very observable for us with the seasons, the cycle of the seasons going around. So when you have 4 of those, then you have an astronomical phenomena that you can see with how the Sirius star is rising with the sun on the horizon. So then it becomes astronomical. Then it's kind of a little bit beyond just our regular perception, because who's looking at which stars are rising at what time and in alignment with which other ones. All of that is kind of going in a dimension that's higher than ours. It's now a heavenly dimension. It's now in the cosmos. So you really see kind of the advancement of indigenous sciences.
Well, it's just something basic, just to think, like, if a year is supposed to represent a cycle, then a year has to happen on a consistent rhythm. Now we say a year is 365 and a quarter days, but we've never in our life seen a quarter of a day. I mean, you can't see a quarter of a day just pass and then the next day starts, So all we know is just what a day is. You can't like take a fraction of a day and put it to the side over here and then say, okay, we're just going to follow this one day. That's why we have a whole day every 4 years added to the calendar, which is what we call the leap year. But in the Kemetic calendar, we call that World Renewal Day.
And it's a day. It's not
a quarter day.
But it's not a quarter of a day, but even the quarter of the day is clearly like if I'm sitting somewhere and then I come to you with a concept like quarter of the day, you're gonna be in your mind like, that guy's overthinking. Like, what the hell was he just talking about? Because that's me thinking about something that's already there, and then me trying to dissect it and find equations in it. But now I lost the concept of what it was.
It's like partying till 2 a.m. and then you're like, hey, remember last night at 11 p.m. when we came to this party? Like, no, we just say...
Following the calendar that was given to people for political reasons, that was given to people, and then disconnecting us from nature, it just kind of... It sets us up for mental instability, mental breakdowns. And now you see the further and further we go into it, 2,000 years into it, and you see how prevalent mental sickness is and things like that.
I mean, we're living in a social model that makes absolutely no sense, because you see everything is set up purely for our exploitation, and there's nothing in the system that's for our benefit whatsoever. It's only just like, how can we manipulate people into doing what we want them to do. And it's so like it's so out in the open to this to the point where like we don't expect anything different. And I mean, how can you not become mentally ill and depressed in a society like that? But other than that, it's just like, you know, so many things that you having to figure out and rationalize in your brain. Like, it doesn't make sense, but you have to find a way to make your brain fit it into your brain. I don't know how to explain it, but you have to find a way to reconcile it with, okay, I have to do this even though I don't agree, it doesn't make sense, I don't like it, but I have to do it anyway because that's what my life depends on.
So if let's get away from the shadows and come back to the sunny side.
Yes.
And talk about the real calendar.
Just a quick cloud pass.
So if we have a farmer's year or a seasonal year, and then we have this real year, or sometimes called medium year, then there's an even bigger year that's really focused on what's happening at the level of the powers of existence, the higher beings. And that's even a year that's too big for us, because what will we track in that year? And that's actually a year of 1,461 years. So we're not going to spend much time on that, because what are we going to talk about?
Yeah, because you see, like, we could both talk about this individually for 2 or 3 hours just in one go. So let's.
But I bring that up because then there's other cycles too that people, and I want everybody to really think about that. People with no internet, people that lived in the village, just them and nature.
No Google.
You sit here in your modern world, turn off your Netflix. We turn off our Netflix, and then we judge those people thinking they didn't know we have it so much better than them. Mm-hmm. But they were tracking cycles like that are even are almost longer than our whole way of life. Our whole modern system has been around. But then they also had a different type of cycle too, which is called the Munny cycle, which happened every 8 years, and it tracked when the Earth and Venus, the planet Venus, face each other. Who's doing that from the village? Like, how is that even possible? How you can't do that now, and you could see everything on Google. You have no way to know those things. But I only bring that up because that's when the village knows that the families will get together, and then they will send their child that's at the right age to go into the initiation camps, and then be initiated into the culture to learn the secrets and things like what we're talking about now. The science, the deeper sciences, the deeper understandings that our ancestors have storehoused, so that the people coming into the culture, coming into life, can be equipped with them to live their life to the fullest. That was called the Munny cycle. I bring that up because when the new year just changed, well, as I was saying, we traveled to some graduations in the Umtam schools, which brought back that initiatic education with the Earth Center mission. So just as we used to, or we still do in the village life, indigenous life in Africa, the Earth Center is bringing that back in the modern world, where you also now have a cycle of when people enter the initiations and when they graduate from the initiation camps. So I want to congratulate all of those who just came out of the camps and talk about that cycle.
Yeah. I mean, you bringing that up just reminds me, you know, you can go on Google and you can be like, when's the next full moon? When's tomorrow's sunrise? Mm-hmm. When's the next eclipse? This eclipse, that eclipse. All the stuff you go on Google. Have you ever in your life seen where scientists announce on the news where we just discovered when the next eclipse is going to be for the next eclipses for the next 100 years? Or you never heard about that scientific discovery, which means like how long ago did those discoveries happen? Mm-hmm. You know, so all the stuff that we're pulling up on Google, it just begs the question. You know, these people in the bush been studying these cycles, have all this information mapped out since a long time ago, that now our modern leaders, they don't have to ask. Like, our modern scientists don't have work to do to try to figure that out, because it's already been figured out. Mm-hmm. And then you act like, oh, it's just is just, the information is just there. The same way we don't question why today is called Monday. We don't question how they get the information of when the next eclipse is going to be. When they announce it on the news, you don't be like, oh, well, when do they figure that out?
Yeah. So another cloud passing, getting back.
But so sorry. I did want to mention in that same vein though, because we tend to be impressed with ourselves as humans for figuring out when these phenomena happen. And the thing that I think I try to bring up that we don't let ourselves be impressed by enough is the fact that there's, that these cycles can be so predictable for thousands of years that we know when they're going to happen thousands of years in advance. Apparently, there's this idea that the universe just started with a bang and randomly, everything is here, and then cycles are perfect and it's so predictable like this, like by accident for no reason. Or maybe, as pretty much all humanity kind of understood for a very long time until recently with the rise of atheism as a result of all the contradictions in the religions that we nowadays have to
political
be
movements.
Subject to. Well, that's another conversation, but
I'll just slip that in there so people can think about it.
But now with the rise of atheism, you have people thinking that there's no divine essence that's managing existence. But for a very long time, all humanity seemed to have that understanding
all over the world, right?
And so to me, it's impressive that there can be beings that are higher than us that are keeping these cycles going on a level where we can predict them. Because if we leave it to us humans, who think we're so big that we can be better than nature, that we can control nature, that we can divorce ourselves from nature, or kind of like live beyond nature, manipulate it how we want, don't have to follow its rules, how we can break every rule we want to, genetically modify, live on other planets, and so on. I'm not even going to talk about Bill Gates wanting to block out the sun.
Exactly. That's what we're doing. So,
but let's say, we humans, if we are the ones in charge of nature, there's no way it could be predictable for 2 days. Like, you know what I mean? Like, how does everything move in its perfect time? Like, it's impressive.
Yeah.
And that just brings the need for us as human beings to get back to where we used to dedicate our lives to understanding those higher forces and what they're doing and what they're imposing on us.
Yeah, which really also brings up something else that we were busy with at the Earth Center, because now we're really getting into what the Sunnyside Podcast is really based on. I know we use the Sunnyside Podcast to connect with other activists, other people in the city really working to improve the lives of people. But at the Earth Center, we also are trying to do that, and we're trying to do that with the premise that we just want to be humble to life. We came to life. We didn't choose when we will come to life. We didn't choose which parents we will come to. We didn't choose which city we will come to. It's not to say you can't love Chicago, but it's just to say we didn't make any of those choices. So as human beings, we have to be humble to life and be like, well, I came and things were already here. So what have the people that came before me, that gave me life, what do they know? And how are they doing things? And I shouldn't be so arrogant to think that I'm coming to know how to do things better. I'm coming to stand on what they knew and then hopefully contribute how they wished I could contribute, So we also were busy because in the Earth Center, really the Earth Center is really a mission or a representation of those existing societies of indigenous wisdom, of indigenous authority that are still surviving in Africa, in rural areas, living indigenous life, still continuing with indigenous sciences and things like that, them sending out an organization into the modern world that could speak for them, that could bring their perspective, that could bring their way of looking at the world, because their way of looking at the world was being erased in the modern world. You don't find them on Google. You don't find quotes from elders from Africa on Google. So in that, when the new year comes, we go into the temples, just like people all over in the indigenous world that have preserved temple cultures. We go into the temples to find out what are the spirits of those who went before us saying we need to know, that we need to know for this upcoming year. How did the energies change? How can we fit? How can we align with nature? What are the powers that maintain nature saying about what's to come in this upcoming year? How can we study it? How can we make sure from week to week, from day to day, we're aligning ourselves with it so that we're truly connected with nature? Because it's like I said, it's not just about growing some flowers in my window that helps me connect with nature. It's, am I actually connecting with how the powers are maintained in nature and how the energies in nature are shifting? So we also just had that workshop. Hopefully some of you all out there heard of that, or else our promotions teams need a little help.
Yeah, well, if you didn't, you can always get on risingfirefly.org and check us out over there. I think we're going to have that posted for sale, the recording of it. Yes. Very, very long and in-depth workshop, and long in a good way because there's so much wealth of knowledge in it. But then also, just if you want to read the transcript of the actual divination itself, that will be available on the website for anybody to see.
That's actually available right now.
Oh, yes. I mean, that is available.
risingfirefly.org, I think /annual divination. But once you go on risingfirefly.org, you can go to horoscopes and then to annual divination. And then soon you can go to risingfirefly.org and find the workshop where we really kind of go into that divination, because when you're going into ceremony and the invisible come and speak, they're not speaking in English. They're not speaking in any romantic language, any colonial language. They're not speaking in a way that makes perfect sense to a modern mind, because they're speaking from the invisible. So they're speaking in a way that makes more sense to those who no longer have bodies, no longer have emotions, no longer have attachments to the many things that we still are attached to. So it takes some time to really understand. It takes some effort to really try to understand what they're saying.
I mean, it doesn't make total sense. I mean, as I hear from those who grew up in culture, traditional culture, it doesn't make total sense to them. Like, they have to take time and meditate and think about it. For us who have been in this work for a long time, in this mission for a long time,
it doesn't make any sense.
Or let's say what feels like a long time to us. Yeah, I mean, we have to work to understand and then compare it with what we're experiencing in life. So yeah, and then ask questions about it to those who know more than us. So for sure, anyone who's just brand new to what we're presenting would benefit a lot from that workshop as well.
So yeah, definitely check out the divination, because it's something that we're not used to over here. I mean, even when I say divination, maybe the closest thing you might think of is maybe psychic reading or horoscope, but we're talking about something much
or God speaking to Moses from the burning bush.
We're talking about something that's more of a technical science that brings a precision that the horoscope is not really touching on, that a psychic reading is not really touching on. So don't take that lightly. If you are interested, definitely go check that out. And what we're really talking about in that is like the guidance coming from our ancestors. But in talking about connecting to nature and these tools that indigenous people still have preserved that allow people like you and I to connect truly with nature, what we really have to remember and what we're talking about as human beings you know, like the tree connects to nature because the roots go into the earth, right? Because it also catches the sun, but if the roots aren't in the earth, that tree's gonna die. The human being, because we walk around on 2 feet, we tend to think we're not in the same situation, but the human being is really in the same situation. You know, the way we connect to nature is by connecting to where our life came from and then what sustains our life. And nowadays, one of the biggest discrepancies, one of the biggest holes in the modern understanding, one of the biggest disconnections is that disconnection between us and our roots. And that disconnection where we now think we can live just by ourselves, dependent on ourselves, mad at our parents, knowing nothing about the grandparents that came before them or the lives of the great-grandparents that came before them. And then we can still connect with nature and we can still be successful in life. But the reality is that's how we connect to nature. That's the only connection we have even to life, because that's where our life came from. How will life respect us if we think we don't even have to respect the gateway that we came to life through? So that is really important. And the calendar as a tool also helps people with that. The Earth Center bringing that science, and then the publishing company of the Earth Center, Rising Firefly, making those calendars available again in a print version. You will find that even the ancestors identified when, according to the energies and the shifts in nature, when is it most appropriate to access the spirits of your ancestors, to connect with them, to honor them, to fortify them so that they can also strengthen you and fortify your life. All of that is in the calendar, and you can also find that on risingfirefly.org.
Yeah, the spirits of your ancestors, the divine world as well. And as you already mentioned, many other holy days, like we just had passed a couple of days ago, the day of Tahuti, which is the day that human beings got our code of human behavior, which we also have for sale as a poster on risingfirefly.org. All these are indispensable tools, and it really, to me, it's almost hard to talk about because it's like everyone with the pulpit says they have, you know, what humanity needs, and you get tired of hearing people talk about stuff and then finding out that it's just a sham or a scam. But you know, honestly speaking, this is the type of thing what we have available through Kebtah, through the Earth Center, that it's like, you know, never in life, almost like you think it's possible to have access to things like what we have here, with the divinations, being able to connect, you know, literally with our own ancestors, those who have passed on, through some of the services we have at the temples, to connect with the divinities and get real solutions for problems that we have. I mean, I was just at the temple and I asked for a problem. I asked about a problem I had with my health, and one of the divinities gave me a solution that worked, you know, and you know, it's like, wow, if I didn't have access to this, what would my life maybe be like? So, I mean, it's not, I'm not trying to oversell anything or sell anything, but it's just to say, at least, you know, if you're looking for something and you haven't found it yet, you know, you don't lose anything by coming and trying what we're doing over here.
Yeah, that's actually what I was going to ask you, because we talked about a lot of things. We talked about the calendar, we talked about the divination, we talked about connecting to ancestors, we talked about holy days like the 19th of Tahuti, celebration of civilization and human refinement. But I was going to ask you, in what ways practically you see you or your family has benefited from any one of those things. But you kind of touched on, you know, temple culture and being reconnected to temple culture, but anything you could say specifically about the calendar?
Oh, about the calendar itself? I mean, just having a way to connect with my ancestors. I can't overstate how big of a benefit that has been. having every 10 days to remind me to be thinking about them, and even just every day having a way to pray, because along with the calendar we have our daily spiritual activities and our purifications that we do, that allow me to recenter myself around what my life is really about, before you start talking about all the dreams and illusions that the modern system gives us to chase. Like, what is the reason why we came into this life? And those who gave you this life, what are their plans for you? And it allows you to talk to them and ask for their guidance and ask for their assistance. And it's a sense of, it gives a sense of stability that I really lacked as a young person, because when you live in a society where you look to the left, you look to the right, and nothing really is adding up. You need to look somewhere within you, or maybe something that's like so fundamental to you yourself that then can give you some sense of belonging somewhere in this life. And just to say one small thing. What about you though?
For me, like you said, it's a lot to put into words, but I would say from a young age, I really got almost obsessive about the system of oppression and me being in the group that was under that system. And so I really got interested, really looked up to people like Fred Hampton, people like George Jackson, people, that were really trying to push back on that oppression. And I remember Fred Hampton saying, the freedom won't be found in the sleeve of a dashiki. He said something like that. But then you realize the people in the dashikis, and just the notion of people wearing their own stuff, they have their own stuff too. And they have their own sciences, they have their own whole world, their whole understanding of the way the world works that's completely different. Right. And that is what freedom from oppression is. So it actually is that.
Right.
It might not be that over here when you just put a shirt on, but you still live by the same calendar, and you still think in the same way, and you still follow the same God, and you still do all of the things that your oppressor or your enslaver gave you. But to actually go and humble yourself to a different way, that actually is where your freedom from oppression is, because socialism or capitalism, that's two sides of the same thing that was given to you by an oppressor. And you can favor one or the other, but there's a whole nother way of looking at life out there. So just to reconnect with a whole nother way to look at life, in a way that even is the way my ancestors were looking at it, it had profound effects on me. Like, I even had a stutter, and that stutter vanished.
Wow.
So, it's hard to put into words.
Yeah, it's big, man. Like, even like every July and August, we're calling on Caesar's name. Every March, we're calling on the name of the god of war. From the Roman and Greek cultures that are the ones who are the predecessors who laid the groundwork for the system that we're now being oppressed by. And we feel like it's no significance to getting out from under that. When they went all around the world cutting people's heads just to make sure that they follow this calendar and their gods and their language and all of this stuff.
So all of you that call yourself freedom fighters out there, you have to, really face that.
Absolutely.
How much of a freedom fighter am I? If every 60% of the things in my language, the only language I have, are honoring the same thing that's oppressing me. How much of a freedom fighter am I if the way I look at even time and how to live in time and space is honoring the things that's oppressing me? So we thank you all again for another episode of the Sunnyside.
Thanks for sticking with us. We're going to try to keep the episodes shorter like this from now on. So hopefully you guys will not have to wait so long to get through our content. So again, we appreciate your attention and hope you got something from this.
Hit the like, hit the subscribe, drop a comment, let us know what you want to hear about, what you want us to highlight or go investigate in the city.
Yeah, please, anything in the news, anything in history, anything cultural, spiritual that you guys think you want to know more about, we can answer your questions. Just drop them in the comments.
Peace and good health. See you next time on the sunny side.
Peace.
Life can be so sweet on the sunny side of the street.